What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Georgia McBride, class of 2016.
Bethany is like a melting pot of so many different people. You go in not knowing anybody, and you leave knowing billions and trillions of people that become beyond just your friends. Some of them are your bridesmaids, or your groomsmen, or your, godparents to your children. And I appreciate every opportunity that I was able to gain from Bethany, and it assisted me throughout my years after I graduated. I still connect with FIMEs from all over the world, which is cool. I know that we were big, but I didn't know that we were that big. So it's really cool to connect with them and see like what they did at their school in comparison to what we did at Bethany. Bethany is the place where you discover yourself and continue to grow into the new self each year.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Adam Llanos, class of 2005. Adam's going to tell us everything about his time, how he got to Bethany from New York, what kept him here at Bethany, and then everything that led him back to being an employee of Bethany College for a little bit and what he's doing now. So without further ado, this is Adam Llanos. You want to know by now. You want to know by now. You want to know by now. You want to know. You want to know. You want to. What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Adam Llanos, class of 2005. Adam, thank you for being on the show.
No problem, man. I'm glad to be here.
I don't have tea for you, but the last couple episodes I've been doing the water. Apparently it's healthier for you, so.
Yeah, a little bit. Hey, we need to recharge the body, so water it is.
So we're going to do this the same way we do every week. Adam's going to tell us about how he made it from New York to Bethany, and then what he did while he was at Bethany. We'll take a break, come back, comps, the thing that connects us all, and then everything he's done since. So, Adam, why from New York to the northern panhandle of West Virginia?
Well, it's funny because everybody always asks me that question, like, why did you pick West Virginia and that part of West Virginia? And it was basically, I looked at it growing up in New York. I grew up in Queens, New York. And it was one of those things that I always knew I was going to go to college. And I always said, for me, college, you go away to college. In New York, you have all the SUNY schools and the CUNY schools, which SUNY is State University of New York and CUNY is City University of New York. So with having those, there was so many. My graduating class, I also went to an all-boys school, Monsignor McClancy High School in East Elmhurst, New York. So it was an all-boys school, and everyone from my graduating class almost everyone from my graduating class went to a SUNY or CUNY school. I would say a handful of us went to out-of-state schools. So it was one of those things. I already knew I was going to go away. And then going through your typical senior year, going through college visits, college fairs. Our college fairs were at Madison Square Garden. So like you got to think of it, how big Madison Square Garden is. There was always close to 1,000 schools there, and it's just going up and down, up and down. And I never met Bethany at any of the college fairs. It was just a random time that I was going into our guidance counselor's office. Brother Brian was like, "Oh, what schools are you looking at?" And I kept telling him, I was like, "I want to go out of state." He was like, "Do you know where?" I was like, "Out of state." Farthest place my mom would let me go was Virginia or like Connecticut. So I had at least the regions. And so I was just like, well, let me go. At that time, it was still Yahoo and the softwares that they would do just to look for colleges. And then I also knew I wanted to continue playing a sport. I was on the track and field team, so I knew I wanted to continue that. So I was just like, all right, Adam, where do you want to go? I was getting recruited to the University of Charleston in West Virginia for javelin, but then I I was just like, I was reading and I was like, man, that's a Division II school, so much high expectations. Not saying I couldn't do it. It was one of those, do I want to go from a big city to a college that was pretty big, but then be known as, all right, you're coming in to throw javelin. And I was like, I don't know, maybe so. So I just kept doing my research and found this small little school in the Northern Panhandle, West Virginia. It was Bethany College. So I was like, oh, let me look at it. Clicked it and looked at the academics. I knew going in I wanted to do stuff in radio, music video production, and then I saw that their comm department had TV, television, things like that. So I was like, well, this might be a good fit. I was like, I don't know if I'll end up that'll be my career, but I was just like, you know what? Let me keep looking at it. So I started reaching out to the admissions department. They started sending me information. And then I was just like, well, let me talk to my track and field coach in high school and tell him about the school and say, look, that is a Division III. I know I'm not going to get no scholarships. And he kept saying, look, you could get a scholarship from the University of Charleston in West Virginia. You sure you don't want to do that? I was like, at this point, I knew I wanted to go away, but I was just like, look, I'm not going to close off my options. I'll apply to that school and I'll apply to Bethany, but I wanted to be able to still compete, but not feel so stressed. So I applied and they had an open house, and it was to come down and stay on campus. So I told my mom, I was like, look, this is one of the schools I'm really looking at. I want to go down for the open house. It was a 2-day open house. So she was like, well, if you want to go down, you want to go down by yourself? I was like, well, I'm going to be there in college by myself. So I'm going to go down there by myself. So, yeah. So this is during the time that it was, you take Greyhounds or you fly out. So there was no mega bus, no other bus services. It was Greyhound. So I was like, well, I'll take a Greyhound bus. About 10 hours on the road, just because Greyhound, they made these stops and it was 10 hours. And I get to the Pittsburgh Greyhound bus station and a sophomore or junior named Adam Checkton picked me up, and he played on the men's basketball team. And then, what was her name? Another basketball player, Kiki Cohen. That's who picked me up. Kiki Cohen picked me up from the Greyhound bus station. It was funny because it felt like when you watch movies and people are waiting in the bus station, not knowing who they're picking up, and they had a sign. And I get off and I look, you could tell I was not from Pittsburgh, not West Virginia. I was straight New York. I had a New York hat on. I had Tim's, baggy pants. I had a book bag on. I looked like I came from New York. So I came off and I'm like, all right, where the hell am I? I'm like, all right, who am I supposed to be looking for? This is also way before cell phones. So there was no way to be like, hey, I'm here. And I'm like, all right, I got their numbers. I got to look for a payphone. So I get off and I'm looking and I have my bag. And then I see Adam Checkton. He was about 6'2", 6'3", tall white boy, and very skinny. And I was just like, and I see a sign and it said New York City, Adam, because I already figured they couldn't pronounce my last name and they were not going to try to butcher it. So I was just like, and I walked out, I was like, you looking for Adam? It was like, yeah. I was like, I'm Adam. And I was like, oh, hey, man, how you doing? So I was like, cool. So he was real cool. Kiki Cohen was like, oh, I'm glad that we found you. We thought we missed you. And I was like, no, the bus was late. And so we jumped in the car. And then I'm thinking off the top of my head, like, oh, the school is about 5-10 minutes away. Nope. It's another 45 minutes driving in. I'm used to the city. So downtown Pittsburgh,
away from a city.
Yeah, so downtown Pittsburgh was the city. So I'm like, oh, this is golden. I'm good. Driving, then we leave the city. I'm like, oh, there's the Steelers Stadium. Like, all right, cool. We go through the tunnel. I'm like, all right, city is slowly leaving, and I just start seeing mountains. I'm like, all right, Adam, what? I don't know about this one right now. So I'm like, all right, no problem. Keep going. I was like, you're cool. Then started seeing cows everywhere. And I was just like, all right, I'm really in the sticks right now. So I was like, all right, we golden, we good, just keep it rolling. We hit that first where you get to Wellsburg and you make the left to go down that windy road. Man, I hit that windy road. I was just like, I started gripping the seat. I'm in the back seat, like, oh no. I was like, please don't. And then they're students, so they already know that route. They're just hitting the turns which way. I'm just like, they were like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. But deep down, I'm just like, we're about to fall off one of these sides. And some of these side cliffs, as you know, don't have no railings. So you either know how to hug them or you veer to the center to hit. So I was just like, all right. I was like, all right, let's see. After the windy road, we appear and there's Bethany. I was like, okay. It's almost like you got to go through the scary patch before you see the light. So I get to Bethany. I was like, all right, I like this campus. It's real wide, beautiful scenery. And I was like, all right, let's see. So where we stayed at for the open house it was called Preview Day. That's what it was. It was Preview Day. Where we stayed at was Phillips Hall. So I was just like, okay. And they was like, oh, this is an all girls dorm, but that's where you're housed at. And there was some other students there. A couple of students that did end up going to Bethany. Other students didn't, or they did but didn't graduate. Let's leave it like that. So I get there. Yeah. So we get there. They had a bonfire, and then I got to meet everybody. Got to meet some of the other students who were like the camp counselors for the year and RAs for the following year that were there. So then the following day was the actual day that you get to meet everybody, faculty members, coaches, things like that. So, and that was at the CAF that they had all the booths set up to talk to everybody. And I was there by myself, so I knew from the start, I was just like, all right, Adam, you must make sure you gather enough information for your mother because she's going to ask you 100 million questions on what's this. So I look like I'm here writing notes down, looking like I'm getting ready for an exam. And I'm just like, all right, and just jotting those notes down. But I made my way, talked to the condo apartment. I actually got to speak to, at that time, Russell Cook was the professor who was doing that station, and I got to speak to him, and he seems pretty cool. I was just like, all right. He was one of the hardest professors I've had at Bethany ever, but he was seeing pretty cool. So I'm going through and talking to people, and you also got to remember, at that time, Bethany's diversity was very, very slim. You could count how many African American students, Hispanic students were in one hand. So I'm one of there was probably two other minorities in the whole preview day that came for the preview day or open house type thing. So I'm walking, and then I make my way to the track and field station. And Coach Don Burns, who was the defensive coordinator for Bethany's football team at the time, he was the head coach. So started talking to him, and I was like, yeah, thinking of, I compete in high school, and he was just like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, shot put, javelin. And then he was like, oh, okay. He was like, yeah, we have a program. It's small now. We have a really good thrower, Zach Cavalier. And then we have a couple of other ones, but Zach is our best one. At that time, he was a junior. And so he was like, he'll be a senior. He won conference. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I asked him what he threw. I was like, well, at the time, Zach was throwing like 185, 190. I was like, oh, well, I'm at 162. And he was like, oh, man, you would score right now in our conference. And I was like, oh, okay. So just that rapport that I built up with Coach Burns, I was just like, all right, cool. Like I felt good. Started meeting other students, and I just felt welcoming. And that was one of the biggest pitches, going through all the orientation stuff, the meetings, through the open house, that there was like, we want to make Bethany feel like home. Mm-hmm. So that stuck to me when I went back home, talked to my mom, talked to my dad, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go to Bethany. And she was like, you sure? It's so far away. What if you get homesick? I was like, look, I always looked at it as, one, I wanted to go away to college. Two, I go there for a semester. If I don't like it, just make sure your grades are good. Then you come back home. Home is always going to be there. So that's how I looked at it. When I told a whole bunch of my friends, I was like, hey man, I'm going away to college. They thought like, oh, Connecticut, somewhere that you could just drive back home. And I was like, nah, I'm going to West Virginia. They were like, how far is that? I was like 8 to 10 hours. They're like, man, you dipping, like you really leaving. And that's like my friends from school, and then like friends from around my neighborhood, because I grew up in the projects. I always say I'm a product of my environment. I grew up in the projects. So like when I look at students who, when I was a enrollment counselor and they grew up in the Pittsburgh projects, I could relate to them because I was like, I get it. I know what you've gone through. I know what you've gone through. I know what it is to be worried about, man, I don't want to be at the bus stop at this time because it's too crazy. So I get it. So they were like, man, you going out there, you going out to the sticks. And then of course, like, yo, you know, people are prejudiced out there, they're racist and everything. And of course, during that time at Bethany, it was that the Mason-Dixon line was so close to Bethany, and there was still ties of that out there. But I was just like, look, man, I grew up in New York. That motto, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. But I looked at it as I'm me. Like if you can't like me for me, then it ain't we're not meant to vibe. So I was just like, we just kept it like that. And I told my mom, I was like, yo, mom, like I really think Bethany's the place. I was just like, I just felt something about it. Like I went to some of the SUNY schools and CUNY schools. I even visited the University of Charleston in West Virginia, and it just that feel wasn't there. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't there. So I was just like, this is what my gut and my heart saying, go here. So I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna take that jump. I'll go solo dolo. I'll go out there by myself and see how that first semester goes. If that first semester goes great, then we riding out until I graduate. And that's the story. And then the first semester went great. That was the story.
So you're here, and you got very involved. So you were involved in the track team, and that continues. We'll get into more of that in the second part, where while you're here as an enrollment counselor, you're also involved as a track coach, throwing coach. You got involved in Greek life. You're Sigma Nu.
Yes.
And you were a part of the one big one I want to touch on is the student judicial board. Mm-hmm. So Greek life at that time, was that something you came in, I'm going to join Greek life, or was it like you said earlier about stepping out of the box, that was the best way to step out of the box or your box at that point?
Mm-hmm. It was one of those things I knew about Greek life. And what I knew about it was like your typical stereotype, like all they party, and they drink a lot, and then they do some kind of philanthropy. So I was just like, well, let's see, maybe I'll find one. If it's not for me, I don't need to buy. And I looked at it as I don't need to buy my friends, and that was the whole mentality. I don't need to buy my friends. So when I went to Bethany and started. That's when Campbell Village was just built. It was the first year Campbell Village was built. So my roommates were Steve Raddick, who graduated. He was a Sigma Nu. Justin Costa, who was on the soccer team, was a Sigma Nu. Chris Feast, who graduated and was a Sigma Nu. But Chris and myself were freshmen. Steve was a sophomore, and Justin was a sophomore. Steve was on our RRA. So when I got the pamphlet of saying, oh, these are going to be your roommates, I always looked at it as, oh, it was like Steve Raddick, and then he's your RA. And I was like, oh man, that's kind of weird. His name is Raddick, R.A. Dick. And I was like, he's an RA, like it's already in his name. I was like, he's meant for this kind of job. So when I got there, it was one of those things, like he was real welcoming, Justin as well. And I was new. And I was just like, all right, hey, what's up, guys? And like that first night at Bethany was you're trying to see what's everybody trying to talk, because everybody's still, oh, I don't know you. I don't really want to talk to you. You have your roommate, things like that. And Steve was the first one. He was like, hey, man, I'm part of a fraternity, Sigma Nu. You don't have to come. There's other frags, Delta Tau Delta, Beta Theta Pi, Ka, Phi Tau. I know they'll be doing stuff on campus. It's welcome week. They always do stuff. But if you want, you can always come down to Sigma Nu, chill. Listen, well, we're gonna be watching football because I think there was a college football game going on. He was like, we're gonna have wings. I was like, all right, no problem. So I let him go, and then later on, I was just like, you know what? I don't want to stay stuck in my room. Let me go down. And so I went down, and when I went down, it was just like everybody was just chilling. It was almost like that image of a fraternity house where everybody's watching football and then just goofing around. And I came in and Steve was like, hey man, what's up? He was like, let me introduce you to everybody. And when I went there, it was one of those like experiences of like, man, that's definitely, if I needed to see diversity, the house had diversity. Moni Ta, which he was from New York. So me and him just really chopped it up real quick. And he was like, oh, what part of New York are from? And then I was like, oh, you've been here. And so he was Indian, but he knew New York just like I knew New York. So we connected. Jared Simmons, Jesse Halden, and then Joshua Beck. And then I just started just meeting people and just going around the house, and people were playing cards, learned how to play euchre. Euchre is real big in that area. So like I never played euchre, and they was like, what do you play? And I was like, spades. And it was like, none of us, like, we know how to play spades, but we don't really play spades, but we play euchre. And I was like, how does it play? And then it's kind of like spades, books and everything. So I was like, oh, I should be able to get this. So it was just a good time. And I mean, it's a fraternity, so drinking was happening, but it was one of those things like they didn't pressure it on me. They were like, hey man, if you want to drink, there's Budweiser over there. You don't have to, but it's over there. I was like, all right, cool. And at that time, I was just like, I'm good. Let me feel it out first, feel it out. So with doing that, it was just like, man, like I felt welcome. And like during that week, the other fraternity houses were doing stuff, and everybody was cool. And like I think just the way I just was very open. Like and people asking like, oh, where you from? And I just chopped it up with them. So I was really cool with a lot of fraternity houses, even though I pledged Sigma Nu. I was really cool with a lot of fraternities there. And then during my time, I ended up DJing. I ended up being the DJ for all like the formals on campus. And then I also DJ'd one of Zeta Tau Alpha's 50th anniversary or centennial out there. And that's where I met Evelyn at as well. And so I was able to become that, what I wanted to be. I came from a big city, and I was a small pond in a big city. Now I'm in a small city, and I wanted to make a name for myself. I wanted to say, like, people know, oh, that's Adam. He's from Sigma Nu. He's from New York. He also DJs. He's real cool. You could talk to him, So, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to say, okay, like people know me. And granted, definitely, it's hard not to know everybody, but I was so cool and acclimated with everybody on campus, all like different pockets of students, all like the cool kids, the nerdy kids, things like that. I was cool with a lot of them. So it was one of those things that it allowed me to say, man, like this was definitely the right choice, and Sigma Nu was the right choice. I grew to be more understanding and become an adult in a different fashion, just because you start getting more responsibilities. And as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, your responsibilities initially are focused on grades and making sure you don't fail out of school. But once I became a member, you start seeing the other things of what I would say, like building a holistic student. So it allowed me to say, okay, I joined here. Let's see how I could venture into other things. And that's when I joined the Campus Activities Board. SAC was Student Activities Council. Brian Fernandez, who's one of my mentors still. And I grew up, like the love for the school just kept growing and growing from joining Sigma Nu, joining Student Activities Council, staying there almost every summer and working with facilities to then working camps and conferences, being able to work with like the president, work with these bigger Delta Tau Delta when they had their yearly like almost like conference down at Bethany because that's their founding home place. And then me either DJing their party or Mike doing some mic work and everything with them. And it was probably one of the best decisions. Like looking back at it now, just like, man, some of my best friends are from there. People who I met there and we're just friends. We anytime we see each other, we're like, hey man, how you doing? Let's go grab a drink in Pittsburgh or whatever. Steve Raddick ended up being my son's godfather, and I'm his daughter's godfather. So and he's one of my best friends. I was his best man in his wedding. So like Bethany allowed me to gain more than an education. It gained family members, and that's what I consider family members. People that have helped me grow through the highs and lows of my life, and they continue, and that's what definitely provided me.
Well, so I think that's a good point. We'll take a pause and we'll come back.
Mhm.
I'm going to send it to another alumni, KJ Karen Dunn with Maple Shades Outdoors. Good on Instagram, maple_shade.outdoors, or once you watch this video and hit the like button and subscribe, hop over to his channel. It's Maple Shade Outdoors. Everything you need to know, outdoor game, fishing, and all that. That's what he does, and he's really good at it. But this is Adam Llanos. I am Carlo Guadagnino. He is the class of 2005. This is the Alumni Tour. KJ, take it away.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kieran Dunn, founder of Maple Shade Outdoors. You're currently watching Dingo Talk with my man Carlo. If you're anything like me and you're really enjoying this content, you should like and subscribe his page. While you're on YouTube, you should probably just head over and like and subscribe Maple Shade Outdoors. Check out our page, enjoy some videos, some outdoor content. You might as well hop on Instagram, Facebook, follow us, Maple Shade Outdoors. Now that's enough about me. I'm trying to get back and watch the rest of Dingo Talk, so I'll talk to y'all later.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Adam Llanos, class of 2005. We left off, we were talking about his time at Bethany. What he didn't share with you is that he and a former guest were king and queen in 2005 of the homecoming court. The former guest being Ashley Doherty. Adam, your highness, sir. So we get through 2005 and we get to comps.
Mm-hmm.
So communication major, what were comps like studying for them, and what was the outcome? Well, obviously the outcome is you passed, but what was the overall thought process while taking the test?
So being at the school for 5 years, since I had an extra year since I switched my major, I came in as a computer science major. And then from the computer science standpoint, my sophomore year is when I switched to a comm major. So delayed me a little bit longer, but I still appreciate the extra year. I was at Bethany. So during comps, like that's one of the first things that they tell you, like, oh, you take senior comprehensions, oral and written. And it's basically everything that you learned. So the fear factor is, man, if I don't pass this, I don't graduate. So that fear factor was always there. But as I went, I knew I was well equipped to pass it. Yes, when you're a senior, you're like, man, I don't remember what I learned my freshman year, my first class. But when you go back and you read stuff, you're like, okay, I remember this. Like I may not remember. It starts trickling in and like, oh yeah, this is this. So this is this theory, and like, so you're just like, okay, I get it. During that time when I took my comps in January, so during the time that I was studying, there was a couple of other Sigma News that were comm majors that were studying with us, but then also Ashley Doherty would study. They would come down to Sigma Nu. We had our library set up, like we had our tables and we all had our books, and we would study for like 2, 3, 4 hours in a row, take a break, go to lunch, come back 2, 3, 4 hours in a row, and then we would quiz each other. And then during the lead up to comps, we would go to each other's places just to study, and then we would quiz each other. The day of comps, it was one of those, you take a deep breath and just
But
give it all to God.
so I remember opening specifically for the com test. I remember that couple minutes before they pass out your envelopes and it's all sealed. You're sitting there, the blue books are in front of you, and you're like, okay, well, like it's here. I gotta take it.
Yep.
And then you open. I remember as a comm major opening the envelope, looking at the test, and spending the first 5 minutes just like, man.
I agree with
this, and this was like day one studying. I had that.
Oh, I agree with you. Like I remember opening up the book and looking at the first page and looking at it and drawing a brain fart and like I don't know this, and then I'm like, all right, let me switch. Let me see what else is on here so that I know like, am I gonna have a brain fart throughout this whole thing and I'm gonna be stuck? Then I was like, all right, and then I closed the book. I remember this vividly. I closed the book and took a deep breath. I said a prayer. And I opened my book up and I said, Adam, if you don't know it, you ain't gonna know it. Just answer the question to your best of your ability. And if I haven't been to Bethany in a while, but I could go into
Weimer
Lecture Hall and I could pinpoint my seat where I was and sit right there and then look down and be like, yep, I was here, and just taking it. And it was, once you get in a groove, that was the one thing, like once I got in, day two was easier for me than day one, because day one had a lot of multiple choice. So like it gave you a lot of multiple choice, and day two was more on the theory, law. So it was more writing. And I was just like, okay, I could knock this out. But day one, it was just like, I would go through and first answer the questions that I didn't know. Without answering those questions, I would skip them if I needed to, and then go back to them with whatever time was left. Day two, it was just like I went in, was like, all right, Adam, let's do a little bit more studying. Day two, and just say, look, it's going to be on law. Just know all law facts that you know your theories. And then just,
Potter box, better know the Potter box.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And it was just like, just know your theory. And then I had Dr. Cook in the back of my head being like, make sure you have this, make sure. And I was just like, all right. I remember day two, the first thing I did when I opened up, I looked at it and then I looked on my blue notebook and I wrote down every like law and theory that I figured are going to be used in this question. So I just wrote them down real quick because I was like, if I have them written down and I forget, I could just go back. And so I did that, and I would write. And once I finished, it was you have a sense of euphoria, but also nervousness because you're like, all right, now is the waiting game. Do I get this call?
And that's the thing. A lot of people now, it's not so much because before you go into comps, you already know what your oral schedule is. If you get the call, it basically means like, hey, you don't have to, which is what it was. Don't come to come. But that fear, but it was, the euphoria is a good one because it is one of those, when you finish that test on Tuesday, you kind of hit that, well, it's done. I mean,
exactly.
I don't know if I think I sounded right, but
exactly.
Back, like.
And it was one of those things like I knew if I failed it, then I'm like, all right, then you have the spring to take it. You know what you kind of messed up on. You know what to restudy. But it was just like, all right, Adam, you took it. Now let's just wait. And it was almost like you wanted to wait anxiously, but then it was like you're gonna drive yourself crazy. So I just went about it like, look, they call me, they call me. They don't. I'll look to see what my schedule is, and boom. And they didn't call me. I was like, all right, cool. And then the next thing was finding out who was on your writtens, and then being like, all right, what teachers are going to be there? Is it going to be somebody I've taken, somebody who's cool with me? Is it going to be somebody who's going to bust my chops? Like, oh, why is this? And then just keep digging. And for my comps, I had Kathy Furby. I had Dr. Sutherland, and was it Joseph Labano? Yeah, Dr. Labano. No, sorry, Professor Rudari. I had Professor Rudari. So I had Professor Rudari for 3 classes because I was also a music minor, and then I was also a Spanish minor. Kathy Furby, I had for 1 class. And they typically put a teacher that you only had once in your comps, and then somebody from your major and somebody from either your minor. So I was just like, okay, cool. So when I went in, I was just like, all right, I know these people. I was like, I made it this far. I don't think they're gonna like, they're either gonna like drill me because I'm close to distinction, or they're gonna just hone in on something that is like, you know it, but we want to make sure you know it. And so trust me, those first 10 minutes, you're sweating bullets. I'm there in my suit and everything, and like blazer, and I'm just like, all right, and I'm trying to answer like eye contact when I'm talking to people, and like, all right, talking to them, not like looking down and like not feeling confident. After the first 10 minutes, it was just like I started talking, and then I remember Professor Rudari going like this, you can relax. And I was just like, and they all threw like, yeah, you can relax. I was like, whoo. And I sat back and I was like, all right. And then they just started throwing questions out to me. And I was just like, all right, cool. And then you go outside, and then you wait like 5-10 minutes, and they come back and they was like, congratulations. I was like, hallelujah. So that's where it was a good euphoric state. And of course, that coming out of those doors of Harlan were great, just to see, because of course you always go in and like, yeah, I have friends, they're gonna be outside, but then sometimes you're like, man, what if
nobody
outside?
shows up?
Yeah, like
Nobody
like,
shows.
like, am I gonna go out like and nobody be there? Is like, am I gonna go out like wanting somebody to be like, yeah, and then nobody be there and just be like, hey, how you doing,
Thanks.
guys? So, and at the time, since I was taking it in January, my girlfriend at the time was Lindsay Keys, and she was from Colorado, so I didn't know she was coming in. And then she had called my parents, and she came in for it. I didn't know, and then my parents were like, "Yeah, if you go down, please give him a hug and a kiss and everything." And so, like, when I came out, I had all my friends, like Ashley Docker was there, like Sigma News were there and everything. They were all outside, and she was there, and she was like, "Here, your mom gave you this and everything." So it was almost like I said, like from the beginning, Bethany was a family. So to be able to come out and see who I considered family there was even better, because then I looked at it as I have a semester left. I'm here finishing up whatever classes I have left with my family, and I'm gonna enjoy these last 3 months with my family. So it was a great time.
So from graduation, how does the road lead you back to Bethany again? And then what are you? So we'll start there. How does the road lead you back to Bethany?
So once I finished graduation, I knew at that time I was like, man, I really want to do music video production. But then I knew at that time it was just like that was an industry that you have to know somebody in the field. So I was like, well, I'm going back to New York. And at that time I was like, man, I'm gonna go back to New York. Let me find a job and try to see if I could get into a radio station. And it was just difficult. So just started working, and then I got into um, I started working at a gym, and then I started coaching my high school alma mater, track and field. So I did that for 2 years. Then I grew the love of helping students. So, and helping my high school students, not just on the track and field side, but the academic side. So in those 2 years, I had juniors and seniors. So some of them were really good athletes, but they were like, man, I want to go to college, but I don't know if I could go to college. So I was just like, well, have you ever heard of Bethany? That's where I went. This is what I did. So I started doing like recruiting for Bethany while I was a high school coach. And when I was a high school coach, I ended up going and taking a couple of athletes to like a Northern Panhandle college tour. We went to like Seton Hill, Grove City, Westlake, Bethany, Washington and Jefferson, and Wheeling Jesuit at University. So I took them. It was like a weekend. Like we left on a Thursday and went Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then I hit all those spots. And it was 7 students, and all 7 students got accepted to all those schools, and got academic and athletic scholarships where applicable, because Seton Hill was a Division II school, Wheeling Jesuit was a Division II school, so they all got scholarships. So just seeing their happiness, because again, all these kids grew up in the projects. I understood where they were coming from. They had parents that put them in Catholic school because they wanted to give them something different. So
They
with doing
wanted to give
that,
them an opportunity to get out and go.
yeah, to get out and go. So I was just like, well, let me do what I didn't have someone couldn't do for me when I was in high school. They just was like, yeah, you should go. There was nobody to say, oh, jump it. We're gonna get a van. We're gonna go visit these places. I just took it upon myself. I was like, I'm gonna do it, because I was like, even if I could get 1 or 2 of them to go, I'm cool. That's 100. That's a home run hit for me. To be able to get them all scholarships and accepted into those schools, I was just like, man, that felt good. And at that time, it was just like, man, I wouldn't mind doing this. Like, I wouldn't mind recruiting and going back into the college realm. It took me some time. I ended up getting promoted at my the gym, the fitness facility, and moved to the Northern Virginia, and I became a manager of the sister gym out in Virginia. So I ended up moving out there, coaching. I ended up coaching a Jewish day school out there for 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th graders, because their 12th year, they actually go to Israel for their semester. So I coached there, and I was working in a gym in the fitness world. But that was still in the back of my mind. Like, man, I want to go back to school. I want to do what that love, that building that holistic student. I want to do that. I want to do that. So during that time, I worked for like 2.5 years in the fitness world and coaching, and then had the opportunity to get a job back in Pittsburgh with the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. So I was like, this is great. It's recruiting, but not at Bethany, but it's recruiting. So I'm just in the field of recruiting. I was like, let me just get my feet wet. At that time, I was talking to Coach Upton. I was like, hey, if you need a coach, I don't mind coaching. And at that time, I didn't have a child yet. I only had my girlfriend at the time. So I was like, I'll coach. You don't have to pay me. Don't worry. I just want to, hopefully there's no job there right now, but hopefully you could get me on. So we're coaching at Bethany, the Throwers, and working in Pittsburgh, living in we're in West Virginia. And that's what I did until I was able to get a job as an enrollment counselor at Bethany. And then it was like, bam, I still coach, doing the same thing at that time, and living in Weirton. And it was golden. I was just like, man, the way I'm gonna recruit is I'm gonna recruit on what attracted me and what kept me in Bethany. And that's how I went about it. I was always honest. And then especially when we had international students, students whose parents only spoke Spanish, like their son or daughter was able to speak English and Spanish, but parents are different. Like they need to feel comfortable, especially Hispanic parents. They need to feel comfortable in understanding, like, you're not taking advantage of me. So I would just be honest with them. I was like, look, the school is great for your child, but if you don't feel comfortable, I would say wait, maybe go to a community college. But then sometimes I would be like, look, I came from New York and I came from a diverse area. I felt fine. They would always have to like, oh, are people racist here? I was like, no, like they're welcoming. I was like, I call this my home. And then there was like, okay. And then they would contact me. And my biggest fault was I always asked open-ended questions to prospective parents and students, and more questions would just roll in. But then the other was, I always told them that they could contact me if they needed to talk about something, the parents, because I always say if you could buy in the parent, If the student likes it and you buy in the parent, then the student is going to go. And I always bought in the parents, and it was just, I thought of my mom. My mom was a single mom. I had my stepfather, but my mom and my stepdad kind of pushed me. My brother ended up going to Bethany too, and he graduated. So it was one of those things like my parents felt so comfortable leaving me at Bethany, especially when they dropped me off. They were like, stay here, Adam. This is where you need to be. So that's what I wanted to provide for parents, let alone for students.
So, and from that time at Bethany, you've stayed in the field of recruiting?
So I stayed in the field of recruiting for another couple of years, and then I moved into more of an advisor role. Like while I was at Bethany, I ended up being, at the time, it was called the Black Alliance Club, but now it's the BSU there. I was their advisor, and then I went to Wheeling Jesuit University, and I stood with recruiting there for about a year and a half. I ended up going to Eastern Gateway Community College and became a TRIO SSS student services advisor there. And then from there, I came to the University of Pikeville. During that time, I went from having a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, and now I'm in the process of getting my PhD in higher ed administration and educational leadership.
And the master's is from Liberty?
No. So my PhD is going to be from Liberty. My master's degree is from Argosy University online. So when I was working at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, I was fortunate enough to be able to get my master's in educational leadership from Argosy. And now I'm getting my PhD from Liberty University.
So I'm going to wrap this up with two questions.
Okay.
You touched on answers on both of them, but so the first question is why Division III? If you're talking to somebody that's on that cusp, maybe Division II, possibly, but you know that stigma of Division III. Want to ignore Division III because there's no scholarships, blah blah blah. Why Division III?
For me, why Division III is because the talent level, if you're that good and you just can't get that quote unquote scholarship for Division II, Division I, the talent level in a Division III school is still up there. You would still compete with some of the best athletes in America. And then if you surpass what your level of athleticism or your sport in the Division III, those Division II, Division I schools will come calling. They will call for you. They will look for you because they don't lose out on, oh, we're going to lose a year of eligibility. They're like, oh man, like we may be able to scoop this kid up. He may help us in this position. If we're able to offer him a 3/4 of a ride or a 1/4 of a ride, that may be good enough to get him here, and then he could grow on it. So for me, it's if you're that good, go to Division III, show out, they'll come calling. But also Division III allows you to have that, now as an adult, I always say work-life balance. Division III allows you to have student life balance because you are a student first.
That's
an athlete
playing a sport.
A sport that's also playing a sport. When you get to that level of D2 NAIA Division I, they're paying you to play a sport.
And also
go to school. So yes, your focus is school, but they need you on the sports side. Some schools, some institutions will assist you in the student aspect, the academic side. So
on the leapfrog off of why Division III, why Bethany?
Why Bethany? Because it felt like home, man. It felt like home, and that was my big thing. It was just like, for any student that's going out and needing a place that You want a small atmosphere. You want people to know you by name rather than knowing you by your last 4 digits of your social, as many big universities are. Um, Bethany was it. Bethany should be it. Like you want that home feeling. You want to be able to say, man, I could see a professor walking down to the calf and just say, hey, how you doing, Dr. Lovano? And know they're going to start a conversation up with you that it's not about school. They're going to chop it up. Oh, how you doing? If you like sports and that person likes sports too, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, what's my call? Did you see that game? Did you see that thing? So it was one of those, like, that embrace, that atmosphere is why I chose Bethany, that home feeling, because it was home and I made family members at Bethany. Like I had a really, 2019 was pretty bad. The family of Bethanians helped 2019, 2020 during the pandemic year. Like they are my family. When I say Steve Raddick is my family, Justin Costa is my family, Chris Feast is my family, things like that. Those people that help grow me spiritually, holistically, professionally, those people help me, and they are Bethanians. And so,
Well, Adam, I want to say thank you very much for stopping by the show.
no problem.
We're going to send it to another staple of this small little corner of ours here in the Northern Panhandle, Chambers General Store, and Harry Chambers is going to tell us everything about it. Because if Chambers doesn't have it, you don't need it. Am I wrong?
You don't need it. Yep, exactly.
So this has been the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. I am Carlo Guadagnino, Adam Llanos, class of 2005. But Harry Chambers, Leo, whatever you're going by this week, take it away.
You've just watched another exciting episode of Dingo Talk, recorded in the secret lair deep in the hills of Bethany, West Virginia. Let me give a shout out to my man Don over at Maple Shade Outdoor. He's got some great stuff going on over there on YouTube and Instagram. Please make sure you check him out. Also, now available as promised, we have the second edition Bethany, West Virginia Mushroom Capital of the World t-shirts and our Chambers General Store. If we don't have it, you don't need it t-shirts. Available in all sizes. So make sure you stop by the store for a t-shirt, breakfast sandwich, our sausage, biscuits, and gravy, and make sure to check out those daily lunch specials. Now back to you, Dingo.